Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started with our second breakout session. My name is Julie Chavez Rodriguez, and I'm Deputy Director here in our Office of Public Engagement, and really appreciate you all taking time to join us throughout the day today. I know it's sometimes hard to break away from our daily schedules and our, I think, very busy workload, but as you all know, today's conversation is critically important, and we hope that what it really sparks in terms of additional opportunities to collaborate and work streams to enhance worker voice is really the outcomes of today's summit. So I will get started because I know that our time is short in this room. And really want to get into the conversation because we have some tremendous panelists here. But as we work to rebuild and revitalize the 21st century movement for worker voice, participation by millennials is absolutely critical. And unions are really taking this challenge seriously, as are organizations that work to really enhance worker voice. They've created new programs, they have new opportunities and ways for really reaching out to and engaging and connecting with millennials to ensure that they understand really the vital opportunities and ways to enhance worker voice in the workplace. So with that, I will present sort of our panelists, and then we'll go through a series of Q&A and hopefully have some time to take additional questions from the audience today. So with us, we have Chelsea Herrig, who is chair of the National Education Association Student Program. Next to her, we have Kevin Slowly, Special Assistant to the Executive Director for Major League Baseball Players Association. Hamilton Nolan, Writer-Editor from Gawker Media. Beth Huang, from the National Coordinator for the Student Labor Action Project. Ann Johnson, the Executive Director of Generation Progress at the Center for American Progress. And we will be joined shortly by Terrence Wise, who most of you all saw introduce the president earlier today, and who has been a critical voice and leader in the fight for 15. So the first question we're actually going to pose to Ann over towards the end. So you came from a union, and you've spent the last 4 years building one of the most successful organizations that's engaging young people. So what are you seeing that drives millennials to really want to participate in collective action? And what do you think unions need to do to engage these inspiring workers?
Thank you, and thanks so much for facilitating this conversation today. I think it's really exciting to bring together folks from the labor movement, but also people who are organizing young workers outside of the labor movement to have this conversation. So I think at Generation Progress, where I work, we work with young people age 18 to 35 and basically work on issue campaigns. So we work on things that matter to young people, and sometimes that involves policy solutions, and sometimes it involves culture change. We run a campaign called It's On Us that's about campus sexual assault. So we work on a bunch of different issues. And I think one of the things that it really has been evident to me, and I worked in labor for about 5 years before I started Generation Progress, and at the teachers union actually. And one of the things that I have seen is that young people are so passionate about change in their communities. They care so deeply about what's happening around them, but they're also kind of skeptical of institutions. And they're skeptical of institutions of government, and they're skeptical of institutions, even labor unions. And so I think sometimes there's a challenge and a disconnect between some of our institutions who are often not run by millennials, and then the young people who are really itching to change in their communities. And so I think one of the things that we should encourage our friends in labor to do is to think hard about providing opportunities for young people to have a voice within organized labor. And that could be things like making sure that governance structures have young people represented in them, or make sure that there's positions for young staff members and young workers' voices really get elevated in that. Because I think when young people have the ability to create organizing structures around them, it's really successful. And I think when young people are given that chance, they'll be able to obviously reach their peers in a more successful way. So I think that's one of the challenges, but I think one of the huge opportunities, because you do have this incredibly engaged, progressive generation that's ready to make change in their communities.
Well, I think that's a great point and a perfect segue into the next question as we think about, how is it that we have to explain or define unions for millennials today? So the next question is for Chelsea. When you talk to your fellow millennials, how much do you have to explain unions and sort of the role that they play in helping to really garner worker voice within their workplace?
Thank you for the question. So I kind of actually have a different perspective on that. So when you're talking to anyone who hasn't been engaged with a union, there's always terminology that you're going to use. It's not necessarily the millennial generation that you have to change the word. I think what it is it's the personal connection that you have to make, and that personal connection is what's different among generations. So as Anne was kind of talking about earlier, is that our generation really cares about the community and what's happening around us. And so I kind of see three key issues from the millennials that I've worked with, and that's social justice issues. Our generation is really passionate about social justice issues. And one of those social justice issues is student debt. So our student loan debt is a social justice issue, which then also brings up the point of why they would engage with a union, and that would be to be the best that they can be in whatever profession that is. And so for educators, which is who I work with, they're engaging with our association not necessarily because of the terminology that they're using, but because of what it is as a union that we're accomplishing or what they could accomplish in their community. And so I think it's just spinning the conversation onto what we could accomplish together as the next generation of union leaders and the next generation of unions.
Thank you for that. So now on to Kevin. You come from sort of a different industry, Major League Baseball, and many of the folks that you work with are millennials and are union members as part of the Major League Baseball league. And so what did being a union member mean to you? And as a union rep, how is it that you have found the opportunity to really engage your teammates as millennials, and what were the issues that were most important to them?
As you said, the Major League Baseball Players Association is almost entirely millennials, and they're all union members. And something that I sort of fell into by way of a veteran player taking me aside and sort of helping me understand what I was benefiting from, the hard work and the sacrifices that previous union members had already made. He started speaking to the fact that collectively you need to take ownership of the job that you have and be responsible not just for the time that you spend in that job, but for the future of that job and for the generations of players that are going to come after you. And for a guy with 15 years of Major League experience to take me aside on my first week in the Major Leagues and say to me, this isn't just about you. This is about the players that came before you. This is about the players that are going to come after you. And what you do here, whether it's for one day or for 1 week or for a decade, is going to affect the way other people are able to play, other people are able to work. And I think what could be very important across our millennial generation is helping young people to take responsibility and take ownership, not just of the job that they have in that moment, but of those who are going to come after them and what that job is going to look like when they leave, when they're long gone, when they look back and say 30 years ago I worked there. Is that work environment better because they were there? And what I was challenged to do by my teammates, and what I challenged my teammates before I left playing and took a job at the Players Association, was leave this game better than you found it, because that's what the past generation of player did for you, and that is your responsibility. Leave baseball better than you found it.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And now for you, Hamilton. Given the role and the work that you do more in the technology industry, how has technology changed relationships between workers? And while technology has created physical distance among workers, how does it also provide sort of new venues and new opportunities for organizing and really coming together collectively?
Right. So I work for Gawker Media, and we're an online media publication, and everybody works there is very tech savvy. We're online all day. You know, the young people are digital natives, quote unquote. And the funny thing that we found during our union campaign is really that the thing that worked better than anything else was one-on-one conversations, talking to people face to face. We tried to actually use technology during our campaign. We had a chat room. We had a lot of conversations on instant messenger, but the gold standard for communication, I think, was still people talking to people face to face. You know, the one thing I will say about millennials and union membership that I think is real is that a lot of young people have not grown up in union households. They don't have that personal connection to unions, so there needs to be a lot of almost education and talking to people about really what unions are, what the benefit of unions are. And that is something that's definitely true for young people, but I don't think that young people in the workplace have any different needs than older people in the workplace, in the sense that if you're a worker and you work for a company, a union can do something for you, whether you're young or old.
That's great. For others on the panel that have also used technology for organizing or have sort of found new ways of utilizing technology to enhance worker voice, can any of you all share additional examples of ways in which you've helped to sort of further cultivate sort of your organizing efforts given this new technology and new opportunities?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Chelsea is totally right in that millennials are incredibly excited about social justice issues. We saw the birth of Occupy Wall Street. We saw the birth of Black Lives Matter really take off on social media in particular. But I think that Hamilton totally is right in that a lot of these conversations happen individually, one-on-one. And something that I really want to bring up is that getting that gold standard of organizing, those one-on-one conversations are increasingly difficult with, I work with students. When students work full-time jobs while they would also go to school full-time, 25% of students who are full-time also work full-time. 78% of students work at least part-time jobs, which makes it incredibly difficult to find them. When I used to work as a union organizer, organizing EMTs and paramedics, most of them were actually in school also to become firefighters and nurses. So it's increasingly difficult to find people in those one-on-one settings, which really does create an opportunity to reach people through these more viral movements, whether it's the Wisconsin occupation, which is where I come from, or Occupy Wall Street, or Black Lives Matter. And I think that's a way to start a conversation, but it's also a pretty surface level way of having that conversation. Ultimately, it takes coworker to coworker conversations, which could happen online, but largely will have to happen in person.
Great. Do folks want to give other examples? Chelsea?
Anne, did you want to go first? So I think, Beth, I think you're right. Like, just because we're the generation that is always on our phone and always on technology, I think that that's just the start of it. And I think that, we're born organizers by using social media. So on social media is the perfect way to get feedback about what people are feeling in the workplace, or how, what issue is it that's important to them. And then together you create an action plan, and then you follow through with that action plan. So I think Beth's exactly right. And I think another example of how it kind of can touch all generations, starting with the millennial generation, is the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. That hit all generations, and it started just by one video on a cause that most people hadn't even heard of before. And so I think that the power of technology can be used through the millennial generation with all generations, but I think Beth hit it exactly on the nose, is that it's just the beginning, it's just the start of it.
Anne, did you
Yeah, I mean, I think technology, young people talk to each other through technology. That's just the reality. That's how people communicate with each other. So if you're not communicating with young people in that way, then you're not getting to talk to them. I mean, that's the truth. But I do think, though, if we take a step back and say, when labor unions sort of started organizing collectively for the first time, it was really about this sense of there's an individual with a problem. That individual finds another individual who has the same problem, and together they work on it and they solve it. And I think when you, instead of just thinking what labor as an institution, but what are those collective campaigns today? Like, what are those? And there's student debt is one, where there's a ton of organizing work happening around the issue of student debt, workplace fairness, like how you address the gig economy. So if you really think about what are the issues that are driving people now, and what are people dealing with in their daily lives? And then how do you use technology to help connect those people? But it's only the beginning. It can't be the end of really building long-term power.
Well, this is music to my ears. Growing up in a union household, I think that I was probably in more house meetings than I was, playing on the playground. So it's great to hear, I think, ways in which new technology are helping to start the conversation, but really driving towards, I think, deeper and more meaningful engagement amongst workers. So to that end, Terrence, welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you, and congratulations. Great job on the introduction this morning. So why do you think that the Fight for 15 is having such a broad appeal, especially with millennials? And as a leader in this movement, do you think specifically about ways of engaging young people, or is it sort of just an outcome of the kind of organizing that you all have helped to spark through the Fight for 15?
Well, I think that it's been so appealing to my generation and younger people because I've worked in the industry for nearly 2 decades, as you heard earlier, and you just went to work every day and you worked hard, and until 3 years ago you just thought that that's the way it was, that you had no control or you could do nothing as an individual to change it. So to actually come into contact with the Fight for 15 and start organizing with workers all across the country, it gave people like me in my age group and a little younger an outlet and a reason to have hope. And early on in the process, it showed us that collectively we can make change. Because I don't know how many times I went to the boss, I need more money. I got 3 girls, I'm not making it on this. And I'd just be, okay, whatever, blown off. But when I take 12 of my 14 coworkers and we're like, we need a raise, we need more money, then we get a response like that. So for the younger generation, or the millennials as we're saying today, it just gave them an outlet, something that they knew they could do and change their lives in the process. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Terrence. So I will pose this question sort of to the entire panel, and folks could sort of choose to answer it. But I'd love to hear some of the most inspiring examples that you all have seen, and hopeful examples that you all have seen of young people organizing and really coming together to use their voice. I know we've heard a little bit about some of the student debt issues. Obviously, some of the other areas we've seen a lot of organizing around and in support of healthcare and other areas. But what are some examples or models that you all would like those in the room and those that are joining us online to really be able to look at and sort of see as inspiring ways that and things, sort of opportunities that they could replicate?
Well, I'll continue since I have the mic. I'm sorry. I think some of the better examples, we know sitting here today that there are still 4 million fast food workers in the United States that do not have a union. I'm not in a union, and I still work. But together, me and fast food workers across this country have been able to act like one before we've actually won one. I know at my Burger King, I work in the city, we had a Hispanic worker, her name is Susie, and she was being attacked by management. They would tell her things like, go back to Mexico, you need to learn some English, and just hurtful things like that. And I could remember 5 years ago before organizing, me and my coworkers, we might be on the side like, oh, and no one say anything. But to see all of us that worked in the shop come together, it was 12 of us, and we went to management with Susie crying like, we want something done about this. She's being discriminated against, abused, harassed, everything under the sun at this shop, and we demand an apology and that this manager be fired. And that kind of response that we marched in on our boss and did, we got results. They wrote a letter apologizing to her, the manager got fired, and it's just examples like that. And across the city, postal workers have went on strike in Kansas City, and fast food workers are right out there standing on strike lines with them. Like when we go on strike in Kansas City, postal workers, firefighters, just to see that kind of collective action in your city. If the postal workers go out, we're going out. Firefighters got a problem with their contract, we're standing with them. The nurses, just to see all workers, regardless of what field you work in, come together and act collectively, because we know this is not the way we're trying to build unions. It's not of the past. where we all work at the Ford plant, so we're all going to go to the Ford plant. I see Burger King and McDonald's workers in Wisconsin, New York, California are my brothers and sisters, even though I work in Kansas City, Missouri. And that's the kind of new model we're trying to build when organizing and actually fighting back against companies on that level as well.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing that and for also really digging in on the solidarity that exists across the labor movement and across worker organizing efforts throughout the country. So would others like to respond in terms of some good models?
Great. Okay. And really building off of what Terrence said, there are so many universities and colleges out there that also pay sub $15 an hour wages. There's actually a part of the Federal Labor Standards Act that allows student workers to be paid a sub-minimum wage that's only 85% of the federal or state minimum wage in that state. And I think that is personally offensive and ridiculous that we are allowing students who are paying tuition, who are paying other college costs like textbooks, like housing, transportation, student fees, to make only 85% of the minimum wage. Also, in terms of the Fight for 15 campaigns, these are actually gaining a lot of momentum on campuses across the country because a lot of students work retail, fast food, other food service jobs. And so they're actually bringing, when cities ratify minimum wage increases, like in or states do, university students are actually picking up that mantle and demanding that their universities pay the higher minimum wage of the two. So that's what's happening in the UC system right now. That's what's happening at universities as close to us as the University of Maryland, where they're fighting to be paid the Prince George's County minimum wage. And then finally, on the point of student debt, something that's really exciting that's happening at Jobs with Justice right now is we're doing student debt clinics that really engage rank and file workers on the issue of student debt. We recently did a couple of them with District Council 37 of AFSCME in New York City, where we had a wait list of like 350 people to go to a union meeting. Only half of people who had been to one of these student debt clinics had ever been to a union activity before. Every agency fee payer who went to these student debt clinics signed up for the union. So we can see when unions engage members on real issues that affect them and have the potential to save up to $300 a month, they really do turn around and get involved in the union.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and that the idea of collective action that you mentioned is like really a light switch going off in people's heads because we unionized in June, and we were one of the first companies in our industry to unionize. So starting from zero, and since then there's been more than half a dozen other online media outlets that have unionized, and that's just in a matter of months. And obviously a lot of people did a lot of hard work, union people did a lot of hard work, and people in all the places did a lot of hard work, but really what is it's an idea that sells itself, so once sort of the first domino can fall and people can look and say, oh, that's a thing that's actually possible, it's very clear the inherent benefits of it. So I think, whatever the industry, whether it's the fast food industry, whether it's a white collar industry or any industry in between, there are benefits of organizing, there are benefits of collective bargaining that can become very clear if people just get a chance to see it in action.
In terms of union models that are successful or trying to put together a successful union model, when you look at the Players Association, our union model isn't written down. We don't have a hierarchy on how you teach the next union member. And I would imagine Terrence can probably speak to this too. It's union members educating the next generation of union members. We have great leadership. In fact, our general counsel is here with me. But he's not the one who's pulling other players aside and saying, hey, this is really important and this is why. It's the veteran on your team. It's the guy who's there to direct you in the stadium and say, look, I know this is your first time on the road. Let me tell you what you should expect. This is what the team owes you. This is what the traveling secretary should tell you. This is what the general manager should give you. This is what you should look for in your contract. It's that generation of union member that is teaching the next generation of union member. And whether you're in a union or not, I mean, right now, Terrence is educating that next generation. That next Terrence is looking up to you and saying, if he's standing up for this, and if he's telling me this is what I need to do, and I can see these results, that's what it's about. I mean, our union and the Players Association is amazing and has been for as long as I played, and will be much longer than I had played. But it wasn't our union leadership that got the job done. It was union members educating that next generation of union member. And I think that if we can speak to millennials about that, any generation can really benefit from that advice, that you are responsible to teach that next generation as well.
I want to build off that a little bit in terms of another successful union model. Is I come from the National Education Association, but I actually represent the student program. So I represent the future educators who are going to be that next generation that you were talking about. And so I think a lack of space in our unions for millennials to have the conversation about what it means to be part of the union. And for NEA, we have a space. And if there isn't a space, then we are seeing our millennials and our new young educators finding a place and creating a place for themselves. And so what we've actually seen is places where, there's a high teacher turnover, why would people go teach there? So instead of leaving and hightailing it out of there, they're creating a space where they can talk about the issues and come together as those people who, I need a job. I pursued education because I want to change students' lives, and that's what my job is all about. But I can't do my job if there's constantly a turnover in my school and there's a constant need for resources and my students don't have what they need to learn. Then I need to be part of my union so that my students can be inspired to learn and that my students have what they need. And so for NEA to have a place for the next generation of educators to even look in on that and see what that's all about is, I think, the perfect example of millennials finding their voice.
Great, thank you. And I think, all of you touched on that real peer-to-peer engagement and the real opportunity to have workers talking to workers and being a critical way of really building that kind of collective action and that kind of collective identity as workers and in your place of business. So it's great to hear. We do have a little bit of time to see if we wanted to take any questions from the audience, if there are any. Yes.
Faculty member. Just want to make sure I can see all of you there. And just a few comments kind of going along with that. I hear a lot of people talking about student debt, and really we need to find a new way in this country so that there is not that high amount of student debt, because I'm coming from the Adjunct Faculty Association at Youngstown State, where we have been organizing with the United Steelworkers, and actually we do not make very much money, and we are 60% of the faculty there. And we have not seen a pay increase in at least 23 or 24 years. But student tuition has continued to rise. And if you look at education, where is that money going in education, that the students are getting a high amount of debt, yet the adjunct faculty members are making very low wages. I think we just need to examine that and see where the money is actually going in higher education. And also, while we've been organizing the adjunct faculty, I kind of agree with, is it Terrence? Yes, I feel like for a long time we were invisible, weren't listed, in phone books, weren't on websites and so forth, but we've seen a lot of positive change now. We're seeing positive change. But I think that because of the internet, we've really been able to reach out to people all over the country, and that adjunct faculty, because of the internet, we're no longer invisible, and we can connect with people from different parts, different colleges on campus, which is helpful as well. Just a few comments there.
I was going to say, I think what you're describing in the higher education industry is something that's happened across industries in the United States, right? This disaggregation of work where you have people who are temporary contract employees. For the young people that we work with, it's so normal now that young people who are, have tons of debt, they are trying to figure out how to, make ends meet, and they have 3 or 4 part-time jobs with different employers. And none of them provide benefits. And so you have this cobbling together of a livelihood from a lot of different sources. And so I think given that that's the reality for so many people in our economy, the idea of figuring out how to create spaces for collective action becomes even more important, because it isn't just workers at one site who are there, day in and day out, and they stay at that job for 20 years, but it's people who are coming and going inside and outside of different jobs. And so, I think the organizing around the issues that are impacting people is really a way to cross over between different work sites or different kinds of jobs. Student debt's one that you're dealing with, so are your students, and so are the other people in your community. And then you can create that collective action around those issues. And to me, I think that's really where the future is in terms of building collective power around economic justice issues.
Oh, well, I didn't. I just had a thought to share. I just like to say that I've been organizing, and I work 2 jobs, and I try to take care of my 3 little girls the best I could. And I know when I first came out, I've been on strike 7 times, but before I went on strike, I would think that I was a bad father. It was something that I was doing wrong, even though I worked 2 jobs, worked hard, and it never occurred to me that it was just the low wages we were making. And that's why adjunct professors are so important to the fight for 15, because here's a person that got the PhD, did everything right by the book like everyone would say, and yet they still struggle. So it truly shows that it's a broken economy, and it is something that needs to be fixed. So that's why I'm just so happy that you guys are standing up and speaking out the way you are.
One university to another university, no health insurance, and like you said, they went to school and so forth, and it's not paying off. And what we tell our students is, you go to school, you do the right thing, and you will make more money, and that's not happening. And then people are so stressed because they are working 2 and 3 jobs, whether it be in fast food or in higher education, that it's even more difficult to organize them because they're trying to take care of their kids. They're trying to make money so they can survive, and it's very difficult. That's where the internet is very helpful, because then you can reach people. They can email or go on Facebook and connect.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Alicia Alamada, and I'm very thankful that you guys get to share your stories here today at the Worker Voice Summit. I'm a registered nurse, and I was recently terminated for actively trying to organize my hospital at Huntington Memorial Hospital in Pasadena, California. And Terrence, we can definitely identify with you in your fight for 15, because the city of Pasadena is, we're trying to act as nurses, we're trying to campaign for a living wage, and we are working towards a living wage for our Pasadena community members. Also, I don't know if you've heard of the Robin Hood tax. So I'm definitely curious to see. I know the Robin Hood tax is like great in name, because it definitely appeals to millennials who have that idea of, they know that there is income inequality here in America. They feel it with their student debt. There's not enough healthcare benefits for our community members and our people, and even our patients. I mean, I see that all the time with low income workers coming in to the hospital and basically going bankrupt because they don't have the funds to take care of themselves. And I was just wanting to get your thoughts on things like that. And also, awesome that you guys are supporting each other. When I was terminated for trying to organize, teachers, other students, nursing students, other nurses from other hospitals in the area came out and was very supportive of what we were trying to do.
Thanks so much for bringing up such an important issue about where does the funding come from to support healthcare, to support free public higher education, to support lots and lots of important public services that we all can agree should be universal and should be free. So my brother-in-law just graduated from nursing school, became an RN in January, and graduated with $70,000 in student debt from the University of Minnesota, and he was in state also. And and so yes, the Robin Hood tax, estate taxes, taxes on closing corporate tax loopholes are incredibly important in making higher education not just more accessible, not just more affordable, but actually free, because we know that it would not take a huge influx of money, but it would take a small tax on the richest people in this country, because there is the wealth in the U.S. to do that. And so I know with the Student Labor Action Project, we have been alongside with the nurses fighting for more funding for public services like education and healthcare.
I think that's a really important point, in that the economic inequality in America that's been growing in America for more than 30 years is across every industry in America. I mean, the spread between the CEO of McDonald's and a McDonald's worker pay is crazy, and so is the spread between a university president's pay and an adjunct's pay, you know, and so is the hospital CEO pay versus a nurse pay. And everybody can look at their own workplace and say, wow, this dynamic is happening here as well, in all likelihood. I mean, unless you have a strong union like you guys. So, it touches everybody, and everybody is in that same boat. And I mean, to me, everybody should know how much their boss makes. And if you unionize, you get to know how much your boss makes, so added benefit.
Great, thank you so much. So we are coming towards the end of our session, but did want to give you all the opportunity to address what maybe some in the room are asking, and maybe those that are joining us online. But for those out there that want to get started, that just want to sort of find an opportunity to come together with other young people, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's on campus, whether it's in their communities, what would be your all's advice in terms of how can they get started? What resources might be available to them that could help them really start the conversation?
I can start, and it won't be a direction to a library or to a resource center. As I've sort of explained, I fell into what I believe is the greatest union in the country, and I benefited from that very much. As you said, the way that our wage structure is set up, the way that our benefits are taken care of, all of that is as a result of hard work and sacrifice of previous generations of baseball players who came before me. In terms of how do you get started, I really think you get started by having a one-on-one conversation. Having a one-on-one conversation with your coworker or your classmate or whoever it is that you feel like is suffering from the same injustice that you're suffering from, who might say to you, yeah, you know what, I thought the same thing yesterday or last night, or next week I'm worried about the very same thing that you're worried about. Starting that conversation, I know we've sort of spoken about that on a couple different instances, but really beginning with a one-on-one conversation, as you said, you can have all the technology in the world, but until you sit down with somebody and ask them, hey, does this affect you the same way it affects me? That's how you get things started.
I would say Google unions in your area and email a union organizer and talk to them.
For students, it's a lot like what we were talking about in terms of one-on-ones. I would say finding just 2 other students, whether they're your friends, whether they're commenting on something that's totally screwed up at your university that you post on Facebook, identifying who you think is responsible for that, and if you were that person who is responsible, what you would do about it if you had their position. That is, I think, the basis of strong organizing, is the identification of a problem that affects a lot of people and finding a concrete solution that could improve people's lives. Organizing just two other friends around it who can then build a stronger base of people through those one-on-ones.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I think that kind of sums it up. Find people who have similar problems to yours and start thinking about how you can collectively solve them.
And I just end with everything that these guys said. And in this day, let's talk real. 2015, this is the topic. Going into election year next year, this is at the top of everybody's chart. Wage inequality in this country. So you're born and you're living in a good time right now to get active and to get in the mindset of what can we do to fix this. And so we're going in the right direction. Yep.
So I guess I have a couple of things. Specifically for educators, go to NEA.org. Obviously, you'd have to make that plug. But I think to everyone who's looking to be involved is don't be afraid. It can be intimidating sometimes to admit that you have an issue or that that there's something going on in your workplace, and you can't be afraid to express that, because if everyone's afraid, then no one's going to be able to come together. And so I want you to not wait for the opportunity to come to you. I want you to create the opportunity. And then the last thing is that we're the key, like the millennial generation, we're the key to keeping unions strong. And so if we're all afraid to keeping our mouth shut or keeping or shy away from saying the word union because we're afraid that we're going to get fired, then we have a bigger issue, and we need to come together because we are the future of unions, and we are the future of keeping the workplace a safe place and fighting for Americans to have a good living wage, and all the issues we've talked about, lowering what it takes to become a professional or to go to school or to follow your dreams. And so I guess my advice would be don't be afraid.
I have to add one other thing, which is I think for the folks who are here in the room or watching, I think we also have a huge responsibility to empower young people within our own organizations and within our own unions. And it is, I can't tell you how many times people who are not millennials, like 20, 30 years older, have sat around in rooms and said, how do we get the young people to join? And I mean, it's really, really important to put young people in the middle of those conversations and make sure that we're all doing everything that we can to empower young people to be able to organize each other through the mechanisms that exist right now in labor.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for participating in this panel. I think that that's a great way to sum it up, that we're never too young to make a difference, and that there's tremendous opportunity and tremendous power across generations, and the kind of intergenerational organizing that we've seen is also a really powerful component to the evolution of worker voice in this country. So thank you all for leading the charge, for being role models in your workplaces, in your communities, in your organizations. And with that, let's go ahead and give a round of applause to our wonderful panelists today. And then we will have a short break before then we are joined by other breakout sessions, and then we'll have remarks from the Vice President.